right, thanks so much, Rommel. We'll remember the memes that you mentioned and try that out next time. Next up, we have Colin Constable, whom you heard. Colin, you ready to go? All right, he has a lot of hardware, so let's give him a minute.
Sort of right. Does anybody know what this is? I'm going to talk about IoT. I'm going to get a mic soon. So I'm going to talk about Internet of Things. So I have a thing here, and it's a radio. And I'm going to plug in another thing in a minute. Anybody know what this is? It's another thing. Yeah, exactly. It's another thing. It's called a Raspberry Pi. It's Raspberry Pi version number 4. And I'm going to get my PC out here in a second while this puppy boots up. Oh, Kevin, thank you. My assistant, thank you. My other assistant. So we're going to plug a couple of these things in. So I'm going to get the Raspberry Pi talking to the radio. That's sort of important. So let me get that sort of running. And we will get there in a second, I'm sure. So that's talking to a radio, and I will switch the radio on. And it hasn't got an antenna, so it actually won't blast us out or anything, I don't think. There we go. So that's the radio. Hopefully I can share my screen, Anthony. Is that possible? Yeah, good to go. All right, so share screen, I guess. Yes, got one. Is that going to work? Does that work? Yep. Oh, it is working. Magical. Slideshow. From the beginning. So I'm going to talk about ham radio and Flutter. Those things that you always hear in the same sentence. You always hear ham radio, and then straight afterwards you hear Flutter, right? No, you don't. But you do if you're speaking to me. So I need to probably explain what on earth ham radio is. So ham radio is not this. This is Good Buddy and all that stuff. That's not that. That's what's known as CB radio. Nothing wrong with CB radio. I was actually got into radio because of CB radio, so I don't hold it against them. There's lots of stigma, I guess, with ham radio. We don't use these things. We don't use valves anymore. Although lots of people probably think of us as valves. We are not old people in rooms with old equipment, unless you're me, in which case you probably are an old person with lots of radios. But the hobby's actually changed a lot. It's actually much more like this. It's a radio just like this, and it's a computer, and you're interacting with the computer and the radio at the same time, which gives an opportunity for a Flutter app. We are getting there, I promise. So that's the sort of thing I like doing. I mean, I have a bunch of hobbies, but actually ham radio was not one of them. And it wasn't drones. That's the other thing that gets people into ham radio at the moment is drones. If you've got a drone, you can actually have a drone that goes a much further distance because you've got access to different frequencies because you're a ham radio specialist. But this is why I got into ham radio. This is my main hobby. I go off-road. I drive in the high Sierras. That's where I moved up to Yosemite. And a buddy of mine were actually doing this trip. This is called the Doozy Ursum. It's a very difficult trip. Takes 5 days unless you're me and David. In which case it takes 3 days and broken stuff. But I worry, my worry was, what if we break down? How are we going to call for help? And he said, oh, you can get a sat phone. We could, but I said they're expensive. So I said, well, I'll get a ham radio license, and then we can always call a ham radio. I've spent at least 10 times more on ham radio equipment than I have on a sat phone. So it was actually false economy, but that's how I got into it. So it's all about emergency radio communications. But there's a whole bunch of other things you can do in ham radio. You can climb mountains. Things can get a little bit out of control, and you can spend a lot of money on antennas. That's not mine, but it's a friend of mine's. You can speak to the ISS. You can bounce signals off the moon. But this is the sort of thing I like to do. Sit in the field with my radio and then try and make contacts. But there's a big problem with this is, how does somebody else know where you are? So this is what gave rise to the opportunity of writing an app that could actually talk to the radio via a Raspberry Pi, and then have an app on my phone that could talk to the Raspberry Pi, talk to the radio, and then advertise on the web what was actually going on. So Lots of this is possible because there's been a huge transformation in the industry to software. So this radio here has not got a traditional radio inside. It's actually doing like sound sampling, but sampling radio signals. And it's what we call a software-defined radio. So with this radio, you can listen over the whole world. With this radio, you can actually speak to most of the world. And it's all driven by software. So none of those valves count anymore, which gives opportunity to write Flutter apps. Other things that change is a little bit by like the matrix. If you look at this thing, they actually look like these days. So that spectrum down the bottom actually means something to me. Probably doesn't mean something to you, but you're actually like looking at this spectrum. So you don't actually listen for signals anymore. You watch for them. Sort of interesting. This is some of the protocols we use. So I developed CATWEB. It's a Flutter app. It's available on all platforms. And what does it do? Well, it says what it says on the tin. It's a CATWEB. So this is a computer-aided transceiver. So it actually talks to a computer, and it gets the information from the radio and puts it on the web. Demo time. And fingers crossed, I got backup slides, but we'll see what the hell happens. So if anybody's played with the Raspberry Pi and they're connected to a network, things are very difficult. Actually very, very difficult because you actually don't even know what the IP address is. So we've written an application called SSH No Ports that if I hit this, it will go do stuff and hopefully tell me how to actually connect to this Pi or actually figure out what the IP address is and then give me a command line back to be able to talk to it. It takes a little time, but hopefully we'll get a result in a minute. We'll see. And it will tell us what it will actually log us into the Pi so we can run a command. It looks promising. We will see. So, anybody's familiar with SSH? Actually, that work? It did. We're in the Pi. So that's a minor success. Yay! So I'm going to use. This is just like a regular Unix machine. So this is a full-on Unix machine in this little tiny box. So you can actually run Dart and Flutter. We're going to run that in a minute. So we're going to do sud-s would be root. And here's a program I wrote earlier. Actually, just as a side, seeing as things are working, I was actually going to run this on a smaller Pi because I don't like carrying on big boxes. This is a little tiny Pi, and it could have done exactly the same thing, apart from I have this great knack of finding bugs, and there's a hardware bug in this particular bit of kit. One of the chips in there is called a UART, and it has a bug, and my software trips up on that bug. I mean, what's the luck? Unbelievable. So I have to carry on a bigger box. So this program is now talking to the radio, and we'll just make sure the radio's on, and you can see the frequency there, 721100. So we should be able to fire up CATWEB. In fact, I'll do it on my phone, because that's what I normally do when I'm out in the field. Don't normally have a computer with me. And we have, and you can actually download this in the store. I went to all the effort of actually putting this in the store. So if you go to the iOS store, or Android, or Mac, or even Windows, it's all on Windows as well. I'm going to log into AI6BH, which is my call sign. Everybody on there is has their own call sign, and this is all written in Flutter. So this is my Flutter app. I told you I wasn't a Flutter developer. It's really super basic, but you can edit stuff. I'm going to edit. That looks good. So this is the ICOM 705. We're just going to activate this, and through the magic of science, I don't even see that, but that's the same frequency we have up on this screen. And if we change the frequency. Oh, it actually does rotation as well, so that's a Flutter thing. I didn't actually write that. That's just built into Flutter. Let's go around this way. Look, it does all sorts of round things. So you can see as it's speaking through the network, it's updating my app. And what the app does, it's a Flutter app, it's actually talking to a website. So all my buddies, you can see at the moment this is my website. And you see I'm not online. So let's just refresh that. And again, pray to the gods of demo gods. And if we scroll down now, we're online, and this is a Flutter app here iframe here. This is developed in Flutter, and again, if the demo gods are with us, if I change frequency to 7.212, you see it's updated on my application. That'll update the web, and you hopefully will see that updated in the web page here. So all my buddies around the world can say, where's AI6BH? And there we go, it's just been updated. They know exactly which frequency I'm on, so they can reach out to me when I'm on top of a mountain. And literally just, that's software-defined radios with Flutter. I haven't got anything else to say, but it worked! Happy to take questions. Let me just run you through the tech again. Raspberry Pi, radio, talking to each other. Flutter app on my phone. They two talk. I update the web page, and the web page updates in real time because it's a Flutter app, and the web page automatically updates itself. Yes, sir.
Simple question.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Well before, yeah, no, absolutely, well before. Yeah, actually, the application that's running on the Raspberry Pi is a C program, and it basically translates the complicated protocol that the radio talks into an API that the Flutter app can talk to. So that's actually what's happening.
So the Flutter app is running on Raspberry Pi, or
No, the Flutter app's only running on my phone.
okay,
And then and in the web. So that's Flutter Web running on the web. And the joy of Flutter is that widget there, actually this widget here, they're the same. But don't tell anyone. It took me ages, right? Yeah. I just pulled up exactly the same widget, and magically it all works on the Flutter. I mean, the Flutter Web stuff was, when did I do that? I think December, and Flutter Web was sort of on the edge. Is it real? And I could prove not updating a web page, not had to refresh, and then all magically I've got my frequency up there. It was just amazing to see me. And I didn't have to write any new code, which is even better. Go ahead.
so are you planning to write for your Raspberry Pi?
Yeah, so it's really complicated code. It's about 15 years old, written by a bunch of ham developers, and I've spoken to them. It's written in C, so I'm not going to touch that. But there's no real need to talk that. It basically gives me an API that I can talk to the radio, and as you can see, let me just see if I can get it up here. I'm going to prove to you that it's in the store. And then we recognize the store icon. There it is. CATWEB. So we're going to open this up. So there's CATWEB there. I'm going to log in as AI6BH on there. So now I'm logged in. It's a Mac app as well, yeah. So if I got my Mac with me, then I can log in with a Mac app as well. So yeah, that's the joy of Flutter. Write it once, and it's on every single platform, and it literally just works straight out of the box. So. Yes, sir. Any more questions? Yes, Kevin. Oh yeah, the perfect number of radios is very similar to the perfect number of antennas. Is just one more. Yes. Yeah, you do. Well, the great thing is you don't need a license to listen. So you can listen to all the radios out there without a license. It's quite legal. So if you want to listen, please go ahead, especially if it's a software-defined radio. They are so sophisticated. For about $20, you can get a software-defined radio that plugs into your USB plug. But if you want to transmit, then you need to get a license. How do you get a license? It's a multiple choice quiz. You have to know a little bit about radio theory, and there's 3 levels. And the first level probably somebody who's in tech, probably about 10 to 20 hours of learning. And then the final one, I come from the world of tech and electronics, and it still took me 50 hours. I mean, that's... So if you want a new hobby that you can spend lots and lots of money on, and never stop learning, then ham radio is for you. If you want to write applications, 100% write it in Flutter, because if I can do it, you can definitely do it. So yeah, that's me. I'm out of here.